Ever since the announcement that there would be a brand new Batman in the DCU, fans have constantly speculated as to who that new Batman could be. There have been many names suggested with varying amounts of fans and skeptic, for example, the likes of Jake Gyllenhaal, Alan Ritchson, Glenn Powell, just to name a few. However, every once in a while, the internet swells with excitement for one specific actor and social media proclaims that this is the actor that James Gunn needs to cast as the new Batman. Of course, not everyone agrees, as comic book social media is not the place for universal shared opinions, but there's always one name that seemingly is pushed the most by fans. That name in 2025 was Brandon Slenar, who has only gained more popularity and roles over the last year. However, when it comes to Batman, the shine has begun to wear off a little bit as he has seemingly fallen to the wayside for the internet's new top choice for the role, that being Paul Anthony Kelly, who before last week was a relatively unknown name as he had not really acted in much outside of a small part in a TV series over a decade ago, as well as modeling and theater work that he has done in the time since, which maybe he was phenomenal in, but he was far from a name that myself and many others had heard of. However, that changed pretty dramatically with the release of the first 3 episodes of FX's Love Story, which details the courtship and marriage of John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bassett. And now I cannot go more than a minute on social media without seeing somebody begging for James Gunn to cast this man as Batman in the DCU, which is very similar to what many of us experienced with Brandon Slenar. And I have to admit, even though I can understand the fascination with Slenar and I still would be intrigued by what he could bring to the role, I definitely find myself being much more interested in the idea of Kelly as possibly being the Dark Knight than I would be if Slenar was casted in the role. But even though I think Kelly has a bit more promise and I'd be more interested to see what he could do with the role, these are both not slam dunk castings. Let me explain why. First off, starting with the positive and the main reason why Kelly is getting so much hype, and that is the fact that he absolutely looks like Bruce Wayne ripped off the comic book page. Of course, looks play a huge role in any fan cast, but when it comes to Kelly, I truthfully do not know if I've seen an actor yet that looks more like Bruce Wayne from the comic book page. I'm sure there are some people out there, but this dude looks like he was born from wealth, and that of course is only furthered when you see him in Love Story, where he constantly is in a suit with amazing hair playing somebody who is basically American royalty, similar to how Bruce Wayne is basically Gotham royalty. However, the thing that is so great about Kelly is the fact that it's not just looks. What he has to play and do in Love Story is very transferable to what we could see from him in his potential take on Bruce Wayne. He is a public figure that has to deal with the press and paparazzi around every corner. He's a very public figure. He deals with the immense weight and expectations from parents that were larger than life and icons of their time. Plus, we see him battle with those expectations that not only he has put upon himself, but also what others have put on him from being the son of such famous parents. These are things that we have seen Bruce deal with constantly in the comics as well as past interpretations in movies. The role is very much a perfect audition for Bruce Wayne. Also, there's no denying that this dude is just immensely charming and charismatic, and I honestly have zero doubts that he'd be able to knock the public part of Bruce's persona out of the park. So that is a huge plus and something that I just do not think we could ever say for somebody like Slenar. Yes, there are moments within Slenar's work where you could see how certain scenes would transfer over into his portrayal of Bruce Wayne, but there was no role that made you scream, oh yeah, that's literally Bruce Wayne. Also, another feather in Kelly's cap is I think he's really shined in moments of emotion within the show. I'm not going to go too in-depth into the actual story because if you want to watch it, I don't want to spoil it. Of course, it's based on history, so it's not like spoilers are really something that affect the show, but I highly recommend watching it if you want to see what this guy's acting ability is truly about. But in moments where John is hurting, you truly do feel it, and there are some really tender moments that lead me to believe he has some really solid acting ability. However, one major problem for Kelly is the fact that he simply does not have a lot to go off of. I have high hopes for the remaining episodes of Love Story, as I think the show so far has been quite good, and I'm sure he will continue to give a good performance, but that's literally the only role he has to his name as of right now. In the past, we have seen plenty of actors who have yet to really work in a lot take on a big role and excel. For example, the likes of David Corenswet, but even with Corenswet, he had a lot more work you could go watch and see that he had more range than just one character, and for every David Corenswet, there's about 1,000 other actors who simply are one-role wonders. And with Kelly, we just haven't seen it yet. I'm not going to hold that too much against him, as I'm sure he's going to be getting a lot more work over the next couple of years, but it is a question I have, as the Batman actors we have gotten in the past were pretty much all well more established and had showcased their acting ability. Maybe not so much Keaton, as I wouldn't say he was much of a dramatic actor before Batman. A lot of his dramatic roles came after Batman, but he'd been a working actor for years. But because of his lack of work, there is nothing I can go watch as of right now that would tell me he'd be able to deliver on the Batman part of the role. In Love Story, we see that Kelly is in great shape, which I do think counts for something, but as we have seen with Keaton and Pattinson, simply being big doesn't really mean a whole lot. I definitely think it's a plus, but with the suit, you can make a smaller actor more intimidating and feel like Batman, especially if you go with a bit more armored look, so his build ultimately doesn't matter a whole lot to me. The question is whether or not he actually has the ability to strike fear and have the presence required to demand respect from the likes of Superman. I will say though, I definitely think playing the Batman part of the role and being intimidating is far easier to do when you put them in the Batman suit. And even though we haven't seen anything from Kelly that leads me to believe he could absolutely pull it off, there's nothing I've seen from Kelly that makes me think he can't do it. And I definitely think, for example, he has the voice to do it. The ability to showcase emotion, be charismatic, and simply being a good actor is far more important in my opinion. And I do think he's shown real promise in those facets, even if it's been a limited sample. And this is where I find Slenar and Kelly to basically be different sides of the same coin. When it comes to Kelly, I have basically no doubt that when outside of the cowl, he would almost be a perfect Bruce Wayne with great emotional range, charisma, charm, and a look that is just ripped off the comic book page. But I question whether or not he can pull off the Batman part of the role because there's simply nothing that we've seen so far that confirms he can pull it off. With Slenar, I think he absolutely has the build, intensity, and voice to be a truly intimidating Batman that would not look out of place standing next to the likes of Superman and Wonder Woman, but I question based on what we've seen whether or not he could be Bruce. So even though I'd be intrigued by both of these actors getting the role, I think it's very clear that both of them have their flaws as of right now, and certainly couldn't be considered slam dunk castings, even though I would have high hopes for both. However, if I had to choose one, I would have to give Kelly the advantage as of right now, and the reason I'd be more interested in his take on the role is because I think he showcased more acting ability in a role that really is transferable to a lot of the things you would need to be a convincing Bruce, which I simply think is more valuable, and even though we have not seen it yet, I have far more confidence that he'd be able to pull off the work as Batman than I do Slenar would be able to pull off Bruce. And for those of you who really want to see Slenar, I get it as well. I'd be interested to see what he could bring to the role, but ultimately the nice thing about this debate, no matter what side you fall on, it's not going to matter in a few months when Tom Brittney is casted as Batman. Of course, I'm joking slightly, but James Gunn really does love himself some Tom Brittney, so I think if honestly I had to pick right now who's probably going to get casted, I'd probably put my money on him, but truthfully, as long as it's not some senior citizen, I'm going to be excited by whoever they pick in the role because I truly do think James Gunn is a phenomenal casting person, and I cannot wait to see who gets this opportunity, as I'm sure they're going to have their pick of the litter, as Batman is the one role in all the comic books that basically almost everybody is interested in playing. However, now I want to know, who do you want to see as Batman? Is it Slenar? Is it Kelly? Or is it somebody I did not talk about in this video? Let me know. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in another video.